So let's talk about those people that are putting in hard work and just not seeing really the results that they're hoping for. I imagine that's a good reason to turn to someone like you. What is it that you could help them with, and what would that look like?
If you really think about it, that is to build a brand. I mean, you need them to build their own brand. You need them to believe in themselves. You need them to understand what their purpose is, what their mission is. And so, okay, once you figure out your message, you define your message, acquire your audience, build a path to sale. Now it's just about copy and paste. I think I was really passionate about building a brand just because so many of the networking challenges, David, and that's something that you and I have spoken about before, that, privilege plays a role in who you know and who you have access to. So I think from a very early stage, I realized that if I...
Okay, so who are you and what do you do?
So who am I? It's a loaded question, but my name is Shinjini Das.
Right.
And I started a media company, the Das Media Group, 7 years ago, David. And I think, who I am at my core, I am a motivational speaker. I love, motivating what I say, dreamers to be go-getters. And, it means a lot to me. Even 7 years later now, there's just not a whole lot of motivation out there. There's not a lot of people that I think motivate others to be their highest selves. And I don't think those who do are truly happy, So I'm a little suspect of the current landscape of motivational speakers because I feel like, I don't know, it's not really honest joy. So I think that's kind of who I am. What I do is, brand marketing, media marketing, I think helping our clients build their brand. So we function in the executive space, David, in the small business space, as well as in the enterprise space. So different levels of brand trainings and, small business marketing, which, is my heart, and executive coaching. So
Motivational speaking, branding. I can see the connection point, but could you help us understand how you see that?
totally. And, David, they're actually a lot more connected than you think, because when you motivate someone, you're actually motivating them to be their best selves or their highest selves. And if you really think about it, that is to build a brand. I mean, you need them to build their own brand. You need them to believe in themselves. You need them to understand what their purpose is, what their mission is. And so it's actually extremely aligned, which is sort of crazy because as it all came together, it wasn't seeming aligned, because in my head, I thought, motivational speaker. And then I thought, oh my gosh, there's a big client services business here. And for a while, I struggled to find the fit. But to be honest, yes, you're right. I think there's a real alignment there, so.
You had mentioned also authentic joy or honest joy, and that you suspect that some people that are building themselves out or branding themselves as motivational speakers might not be speaking from a place of honesty or of joy. What makes you feel that way, and why do you think that might be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really feel it, I don't really feel like they're happy. And it's just a feeling. I mean, to be honest, who knows, right? I think that's with social media now. I mean, who knows if they're happy? I just don't get the feeling that they are happy. I just don't get the feeling that they're radiating from a space of authentic joy. And, the reasons, I mean, I'm not a therapist, so the reasons are many, I'm sure. But, I think something that I'm proud of is that, I am really radiating from a space of authentic joy, and my go-getters or followers can really see that, and they feel it and they see it. So I don't have to prove that, So I think it speaks for itself. And, maybe in my own way, I am trying to inspire others and other go-getters to be more authentically joyful as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I spoke with a gentleman earlier today who mentioned that the your life is a story, essentially. And if you're looking at past events, like maybe something that you regret or something you wish didn't happen, it's not like it defines you. It's not like who you are. It's what you tell yourself about it. Like what did it mean to you? What was the data that you learned from it? So I think perhaps maybe the suspicion around public speaker or motivational speaker rather, not coming from a place of authentic joy, maybe on a subconscious level, if not conscious level, it might signal that they're not buying their own story, and therefore maybe it's like kind of a protection, like this story is maybe not helpful for me. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I just, let me put it this way. I think what I'm trying to say is, David, most motivational speakers come from a place of pain. Like, life is really painful, and I've been through a lot, and pain, so basically they're motivating through pain, which, as you know, is definitely viable, and it works. And, a lot of people feel pain, which is why, it resonates, right? And so nothing against that approach. I just think that if I can motivate from a place of joy, why not? I think is my approach. So I think we just have different approaches because, I would say my quote unquote competitors definitely function from a lot more pain than I do. So I just think it's a different approach. But for me, I would much prefer existing in joy, being in joy, and then somewhere inspiring people to live in joy, not pain. So yeah.
Well, I believe in living in love.
That's
and joy.
right. That's right.
So
I wonder why.
You won't find an argument here.
I wonder why.
So let's talk about branding a little bit. Once again, I mean, we could probably guess at some of the obvious reasons why, but why is branding important? What does it mean for a company or a person to have a strong brand or positive brand?
I think we're living in this world now, David, where there is so much competition, and competition is no longer local. It's not citywide. It's not statewide. It's not nationwide. It's global, right? It's international.
And not generation defined either.
Yes, exactly. Multi-generational, international. And I was just talking because I told you I have this passion for local business marketing. So, for example, there are people in Greece who visit spas here where I am, so that's a great case study, right? So a spa cannot just market to people 5 miles away from the spa because you never know that, from Greece or from, Athens and Malaysia and whatever, if people are coming here for vacation and they want to go to a spa, well, guess what? They actually need to like your brand on Instagram, right? Because that is the only source that they're going to have to connect with your business, right? Before they're here on vacation, because usually they're probably not going to call you. If they do call you, again, they're probably Googling you, right? They're looking you up on Instagram, right? They're looking at your website. They're looking at your reviews, Google reviews, right? And so we just were talking about that today, David. So I mean, I couldn't explain it better myself, but that's exactly why you need a brand, because your customer right now could be in Greece, but next week, they are coming to America. And I mean, right. So, but as you know, like Athens or Greece or Malaysia, I mean, these standards are very different. What they look for is different. How they want to be communicated with is different, right? And so we do need to build digitally global brands that are agile, that are, functioning. And that's something that you and I spoke about, before, David, that, I'm just really passionate about building brands that are just globally competitive and agile and ultimately that drives sales, because otherwise, what's the point?
So what is difficult about building a good brand?
I think what's difficult, David, and it's something that I definitely have struggled with in my own brand building process of just building myself into a personal brand, is really figuring out what's unique about you, David, right? Because that's something that you and I have spoken about is, we don't want to copy others, right? We don't want to be overly inspired by other people because we want our own unique authenticity to shine through. And, so I think it takes a tremendous amount of self-awareness, David, to know like who the hell you are as a person, as an executive, as a spa, as a restaurant, as a med spa, as a dermatologist practice, as a private practice plastic surgeon. I mean, just all of it. I think it takes an incredible amount of self-awareness for you to sort of figure out who you are, what you do in this world, what you do really well, and why do people like you? Why do people come to you? Why do you have happy customers? I think it's a lot of analysis, and I think it's really difficult to actually have that level of analysis running in your mind all the time, So I think that for me is the hardest part. And even just as an influencer, online, Instagram, whatever, if you think about it, people follow you for a very specific reason. Even they do business with you, whether that's a restaurant or a hospital, people come to that hospital versus a different hospital for
Right.
a very specific reason. And I think as the founder, as the owner, as the, COO or whatever, you have to really know what that is, and so that's how you create better content, for your audience and for your, clientele and prospective clientele. Because I think something, and I'm just being honest, just something that I did that I don't want to do again is I feel like I was just building the wheel again and again.
Okay.
Right. But it's like now it's like, okay, once you figure out your message, you define your message, acquire your audience, build a path to sale. Now it's just about copy and paste. How many other audiences look and seem like that, right? So like if you're a restaurant, you have these 12 happy customers. Basically, can we go after their friends? Can we go after people like them? You don't have to completely reinvent the wheel is what I'm saying. Because I think sometimes I got into the habit, both with myself and our clients, of, we got to build the wheel again and we have to reach out to all these new, customers. But it's like your future customers look and sound pretty similar to your current customer, right? I think that's fair to say. So
yeah, a lot to unpack there. Speaking of social media, each platform has its own culture, its own algorithm, the way that people communicate, generally speaking. TikTok versus Instagram versus LinkedIn, for example, or X. YouTube, of course, I guess you could consider more obviously videos, less, chatting, but the comment section. So like, which platforms are you focused on personally? And could you talk about some of the differences at a high level?
Totally. So for me, as a motivational speaker, David, I would say I am on X. And you and I spoke about this before the recording. Is it, tweets? Is it posts? Who knows? But I'm on X. I'm on YouTube. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. And I guess Snapchat, for the younger go-getters, I call them younger demographics. And what else? I don't know, Threads. Maybe I'm missing one. 6 or 7, I feel like, total. But I think a couple of things. You're right. Every platform is different. So for X, for example, I'm a big fan of written content. And so for me, motivational quotes are worth their weight in gold for me on X, right? And so does that mean that you don't do videos? No, that's not what it means. I'm having a lot of fun creating motivational quotes, meaning my own motivational quotes on X. And, we're doing 16 million views, already this year. And so, can I do more video content? Yes, absolutely. But, I think I'm also a big believer to anyone listening or watching this that it sounds funny, but what is the easiest path to success? And not the hardest path, right? So, because, video creation, David, is difficult, as you know, more than anyone. So, I think, putting out, a couple of hundred motivational quotes a day or, however many I do is actually really easy for me, So it is the path of least resistance and incredibly high ROI for me. So that's what I'm doing on X. That's not to say we won't do videos and interviewing other go-getters and maybe interview series. And of course, I want to do all of that. I want to start a X space. It's like the Spaces is a audio program.
Yep.
Definitely, I'm interested in that. But I'm also in the business of like, what is the quickest way for me to drive the ROI that I want?
Yeah.
And so for that, it is just motivational quotes, which have been doing really well. That's X. Instagram, David, is very visual content. And so people want to be inspired, at least from a motivational speaker standpoint, David, from just my life story, what I believe in. I think there is a big desire, David, from as a motivational speaker to basically understand that the things that you are talking about, teaching about, preaching about, educating your audience. And I think people are like, have you been through that? Or, do you struggle with that? Or like, they want to know your story on Instagram. So I can't just put motivational quotes on Instagram and expect that to fly, because it's not going to fly. And it's not going to fly because they want to know the backstory, right? They want to know, have you struggled with, pain and, I don't know, feeling like a loser or whatever it is that, you're talking about. So I think that's Instagram. So which is a hard one lesson, because in the beginning I definitely tried to, push out more just kind of platitudes and, but it just doesn't work, because people want to know essentially your story. They want to know your story on Instagram. So that's kind of how I've been functioning. And for me, of course, LinkedIn is more business branding. It's more, as an executive, as a thought leader, as a CEO of a company, as COO of a company, why is, thought leadership important? Why is your brand important? How can you better your brand, and then also just positivity on LinkedIn, David. Business leaders are burnt out. They're tired. They're stressed. I think they're sicker than ever before also, I think. So, people are really appreciating my sort of business, positive mindset sort of platitudes and reminders and how to be a go-getter in business. So I think that's LinkedIn. And of course, Snapchat is sort of my youth engagement platform. I have a very big youth engagement side to the business, speaking to kids, speaking to college students, and how to be go-getters. And so
that's great.
That's Snapchat. Yeah, that's Snapchat. They're all young. And then, am I missing one? YouTube. I've done way back when, David, that, definitely a room for longer form content around sort of brand building, educational content. I think as I build out my YouTube presence even more, David, I'm a big fan of edutainment, right? So that's sort of educational entertainment. So creating video series on public speaking, creating video series on how to, be more confident, how to ask for your worth, how to know your worth, all these kinds of topics. I'm very interested in creating more longer form content, longer form videos on that. Because, I think we've spoken about this before, but as a sort of Indian American young woman, there's just not a whole lot of representation or content out there that other young brown and Black people can relate to, and the self-development. So it's a pretty big market there. But no, I'm still a baby. I'm still a baby on YouTube. So
okay. Yeah. Well, you're the top branding voice on LinkedIn. How does that happen? How does one become the top branding voice on LinkedIn? Could you talk about that?
Yeah, totally. No, thank you for saying that. I think it was definitely a dream come true. And, again, my age group, because I'm Indian, but I'm American. And I don't know of any others who have, or who have a similar, honor. So it was a really big deal. I think a couple of things. I've been posting on branding, on building your brand for a long time now. So definitely a few years. And how this happened, David, is I got a notification to contribute to these brand strategy articles on LinkedIn. And then at the bottom, because, this stuff is not public news. I didn't even know about it. But it said, kind of in fine print at the bottom of that article that if you contribute to 3 or more articles in your space. Obviously, my space is brand strategy. Your space could be entrepreneurship, I don't know, development or corporate development or fundraising or VC or whatever it is. You contribute to 3 or more articles with quality, basically comments, and you're seen as that. You get voted in the top 1% of contributors in that area, and then you get that award. So
Nice.
basically, it was many months of just posting and using the right hashtags. For me, that's hashtag motivational speaker. That's how I branded myself. And then I'll say hashtag branding, hashtag this, and then they invited me to contribute to 3 brand strategy articles, and then they gave me this award right after. But you got to keep contributing to brand strategy articles, David, to keep this on.
Makes sense.
So this is not like a lifetime award. Like
golden
you
handcuffs.
Need to, yeah, right. Yeah, you need to keep contributing in order to stay in the top 1%. Is what I'm saying.
You work for LinkedIn now.
Right, exactly. So like you'll see me on a day-to-day basis now. Part of what makes me a go-getter is sort of being self-motivated enough to always comment on articles, because I think I saw every 60 days they basically review your case. So
okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
You have about 250,000 followers on X. What does that look like for people that maybe aren't 4 digits or aren't 5 digits? Like, is it a different platform when you go up? Like, how do you manage? I know we touched a little bit on kind of the DM strategy, but could you just help people understand what it's like on the other side when your account is that massive?
No, I definitely remember when it was nothing, and how sad it looked, actually, because like any tweet or post you do, it's like 2 likes, and things feel slow. I think the biggest thing that I can say, just comparing that time in my life to today, is that things feel really slow, because it's like you were writing all this stuff, and you put in hard work. It's not that David 5 years ago was not working hard, so like I was working very hard 7 years ago, but like it was like 2 likes or something, so yeah, you do feel like this is so like slow,
Yeah.
But I think me today, I mean, you see it, but I'll tell you from my angle. I mean, in a second, I'm getting, like, when I repost something, because I my whole brand is motivation, so I repost a lot of like motivational quotes, and some of them are just kind of funny. Some of them are like, I'm tired today, and I'll like repost that, because people are tired. As a go-getter, you're tired. That's a fact. So like that repost, it gets like 50 likes in 2 minutes or so. Like I think that the difference is very remarkable. It is. I feel it. I see it. It's very evident to me. It's very evident to me. So I could sit here and tell you 16 million views already this year. 5 million views in 3 months, and whatever. But like, to really just feel that energy is awesome. And I definitely feel the difference. So yes, anything I post, a couple of thousand views in a few minutes. I mean, the difference is palpable. The difference and I think from the media perspective, like, that's what you want, right? Like, that's my objective, is like, when I say something, or when, I post content, I want thousands of people to say, oh my gosh, I'm a go-getter. I agree. So I think the biggest gratification for me is that, okay, this is working, whereas like, 5 years ago, it did feel like, oh my God, I mean, this is, how do you even do this? Like, who are my followers? And that's what I'm saying. Like, we all have to be self-aware, because the same people who followed that other girl who's a motivational speaker may not really like me, right? I mean, we're all different.
Right.
So I think even finding my sort of crowd was a huge challenge, So
let's talk about those people that are putting in hard work and just not seeing really the results that they're hoping for. I imagine that's a good reason to turn to someone like you. what is it that you could help them with, and what would that look like?
Totally. So we help them with a few things. David, I spoke with you about this before, but it's really a system that we've built around content, around branding, around brand marketing, which is DAS, right? DAS Media, define your audience, acquire your audience, sell to your audience. And so we really go in and define your message, because if things are not working, David, I've thought about this a lot. I'm an industrial engineer from Georgia Tech. And so, I've really analyzed this. It's that your messaging is off. Your audience strategy is off, which is why your conversion is off. It's very rare that your conversion is awesome and your messaging sucks, but your audience is great. So typically what I've seen is if conversion is solid, it means that your message and audience are working. If your conversion is off, it means that either your messaging is off or your audience is off or both are off. So I think that is the analysis that I have really come to. And it's been true in every case, even in my case, even platforms that I was struggling on. So like for me, I'll just be upfront. Instagram was a little bit of a struggle because moving from a verbal identity, meaning motivational quotes that are written, to a visual sort of motivational identity with my, brand and storytelling, my just pain, success, whatever. It is a different way to do things, and to be honest, I still, it's not the easiest thing. It's not the easiest thing to go from producing hundreds of motivational quotes a day for X and then on Instagram to just talk about my life. And it's a very different skill, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah,
so,
I imagine.
Yeah.
Much like speaking different languages, though. And, you're multilingual, so that maybe that helps, that fluidity of thought.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm super happy to be multilingual. So I speak Spanish fluently. I speak Bengali fluently, Hindi, which is another Indian language, and a little bit of French. So yes, absolutely.
And your English isn't bad either.
Right, exactly. Thank you. We're very right. Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, impressive. And what, like looking back on your journey so far, what was like one of your low points, like for those entrepreneurs that maybe are like, just in the valleys, and like, could you just talk about one of the low points that you were in and how you got out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think you touched on the low point, David, which is to build a brand. I mean, you need a real momentum on social media, which was really difficult for me to build, and a lot of that was not knowing who my audience is. For those of you watching this, seeing this, who are like me, that are sort of minorities or Black or brown or Iranian or whatever, you guys don't really fit into any like system that's built. So I've had to build my own, system, right? Everywhere from what am I going to say? Who is it for? Because even something that I realized was my audience, like, because the content is so aspirational, David, it's so like motivational, uplifting. I was having a much stronger traction with Indians in India versus even Indians in America. You know what I'm saying? So, because, when you look at people who really want to rise, they're kind of in the motherland still, so just things like that. Whereas like, if you look at most people like me who are American, I don't think that they're targeting Indians in India, so like, I think the biggest challenge for those of you listening, watching, and for me, it was, how do you build your own system? Because when you are a young woman, when you are like, nothing I've achieved, there has been a path for, David. Nobody is a woman. If they are a woman, they're white, which, like, no offense, but we're functioning on very different, privilege, path, and so I think that was a huge challenge is I got to build a digital brand. If I want to monetize and I want to get more clients, and of course, you can have a website and that's, I guess, good enough. If that speaks for itself. But I think I was really passionate about building a brand just because so many of the networking challenges, David, and that's something that you and I have spoken about before, that, privilege plays a role in who you know and who you have access to. So I think from a very early stage, I realized that if I can become a giant on social media, now all of a sudden, David Lovejoy is talking to me, right? And so like, that's amazing, right? Versus like, for me to connect with you organically in real life, I mean, I don't know. It could have happened. I just think it would have taken a lot longer, right? And so that's why I was always very passionate that I can't just have a website and a couple of clients and that's it. Like I gotta be like renowned. Like I need to break through this sort of networking barrier that many of my friends face, where like it's hard for them to charge $25,000 a keynote, right? So like, because they're women of color and they're not paid that, right? So if I want to get that and I want to, like, you got to have a brand, So I think the first challenge was building like basically what I have right now. That was a huge challenge. The
Yeah.
second challenge, which I'm working through as we speak, is faster monetization, right? So there's an element of digital outreach. There's an element of, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, onboarding different clients. Enterprise obviously is a very long sales cycle for brand trainings and all of that. And I'm happy to do all of that, David, but I also have to get smarter about ROI, right? And so like, I think I mentioned to you before when we spoke that we're a Red Hat vendor, right? Red Hat vendor, which is awesome. But that process took so long, and like their payment cycles are net 60, right? And so I have to get smart that like, what are we going to do for those 60 days to quote unquote make money, right? So I think where I'm at right now, which is sort of part 2 of the challenge, once you've built the brand, is scaled monetization. Not just monetization, but scaled monetization. Because I think where I've been the last few years, I've booked like 2 or 3 big enterprise deals, and I was so happy. I was like, grand deal. Oh my gosh, I had brand training their executives and, however many thousand here, however many thousand there. But I think me today, I realized that you can't live off of that, because a lot of it is the net 60. A lot of it is, it just takes so long for those deals to even materialize, right? And so I'm at a point now where just building out a couple of different revenue streams, targeting local businesses that have cash a lot faster to spend on their marketing, situation. If I meet businesses today, a lot of them can meet me with a check today. And I've had that happen, to work on their Instagram game plan and marketing strategy and all that. So I think where I am today and the challenge today is how do we monetize faster and at scale? Because I think the path that I was on, it's not a bad path, and I'm still on that path, but maybe my approach now is let the B2B outreach run in the background, right? So the Red Hats, the Cisco, there's absolutely, I want to be a vendor for all of them, but I'm just, now that I have more experience, I know that the time cycle is so long, David, that it's not viable for us to spend so much time and energy and, hope on that and just not be paid for 60 days. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what I was running into.
Okay.
And I'm actively solving that right now.
What have been some of the highlights of your clients? Like, what are some of the success stories you can share with us?
Yeah, honestly, I think Red Hat changed my perspective because that was the first real enterprise play, David. And these were all EMEA, so Europe account executives. And just hearing from them that the way that I instructed them on their content strategy on LinkedIn actually like almost doubled their pipeline, opened up customer airtime with very, very eminent customers from Barclays, from Shell. And these are all like CTOs, they're CIOs at, Barclays and Shell. And like these people were like opening their messages for the first time because of the content that we built for them, which is like crazy. Just because I never expected it to have such a strong enterprise feedback or result. I thought, oh, this would be good for like, small businesses or just kind of, influencers or whatever. But it's like, it had a real impact on their bottom line. Which was like amazing, and I think that for me was a real eye opener. And I thought, wow, their deals on average are multi-million dollars, right? So if basically my content is getting them closer to a multi-million-dollar SaaS deal, I should charge more. First of all, that was my initial thought. The second thought was that there's a real market here for other tech companies to, train their executives, to train their women, on how to build their brand, how to sell their products, so that was a huge win. And then just on the small business side, I mean, some of these businesses really struggle with marketing, they really struggle with getting sales and just kind of coming at it from a very organic space. And we worked with a local gym last year, and just they were so happy. They're like, oh, our LinkedIn looks great. And we signed up so many more clients in the time that we worked together on their, content strategy. And so I think that's been really fun. I think in general, if I were to sum it up, I would say the impact of branding, content, and conversion, David, on multiple sizes of clients, right? So we've been able to sort of change this individual's life who went from never posting on LinkedIn to now just almost becoming like a LinkedIn influencer on his own sort of accord, all the way up to sort of small businesses, all the way up to enterprise. So I just think that life cycle is really interesting for me. Yeah. So it's like this one person to these big teams.
Right.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite brands? Like who do you think does it right?
Who does it right?
From a brand perspective.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think because I'm very really leaning into my feminine energy now. I mean, I'm an industrial engineer. I was surrounded by men for so long that I think a lot of brands that I am an avid customer of now. So there's a jewelry brand that I really admire, Kendra Scott. So it's a sort of Austin-based jewelry brand, and just everything there is so experiential. They have jewelry making sort of color. It's called Color Bar, where you can make your own jewelry, and that's awesome. Obviously, if I make my own jewelry, I'm gonna buy that. So I just think it's really brilliant on how to interact with the customer and how to mean something to them. Because they do a lot of personalized jewelry, a lot of engraved jewelry. So and that's kind of David, when I come out with our merchandise line. That's the kind of stuff I want to do. It's pick a gift for the go-getter in your life, right? Pick a gift for your go-getter mom, on Mother's Day. And, it's so interactive. Their marketing is so interactive. So they'll be for Mother's Day, here's this mom necklace. And obviously you would buy that, right? If it's for your mom, you're going to buy that. So I think that's awesome. And then another brand, that I'm a fan of now, it's press-on nails. So instead of going to the nail salon, press-on nails, eyelashes, magnetic eyelashes. It's called Glamnetic. I just really admire just their marketing. It's like a party. There's no pressure to buy. Because sometimes I get into this thing of I have to sell this, right? And I have a sales quota, and it's looking at them, you're oh my God, it's just a party. So maybe I, interview customers on Instagram Live, and, it's attraction marketing. You shouldn't have to push so hard, So I think those are two brands that I'm an avid customer of, as well as I just admire. They're female founded, and, one of them is minority female founded. And I just really admire how they do things, because I think my training is so male, because I've always been surrounded by, Deloitte Consulting, technology consulting, digital marketing, i.e. industrial engineering, that sometimes I go into a very masculine way of selling, which is sales quota. I got to hit this. But then I looked at these brands, and, they're just 25% off, have a party, Mother's Day. And then no doubt their sales are just through the roof, because when you engage people like that in a party, in a, they're going to buy, just because that energy is so magnetic that, they're going to come to the Mother's Day brunch or whatever at the store, and they're going to buy all the jewelry. Obviously, they're going to buy all the, earrings. And so I think I'm really learning that, David. I can't say that method is natural for me, because I've been trained to kind of, it sounds bad, but kind of push. I've been trained to, chase the deal and My dad is a business development guy his whole life. That's kind of been his, strategy. So I think this idea of like attracting it, this idea of building collateral to attract it and then just watch your sales explode is really new to me, but I think it genuinely, I think it works a lot better than pushing. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that and all of your insights. It's really impressive to see your journey so far. And in many respects, you're just beginning. So I'm curious to see, excited to see where this leads. Is there anywhere that you'd like to point us, like any company that you want us to check out, or your own socials?
Yeah, I think just my socials. If you want to follow me for more go-getter motivation in 2024, I definitely help you become a go-getter with that mindset, with your just positivity, high energy. So yes, on all my social media platforms, I'm at Speaker Shinjini. That's SpeakerShinjini. And yeah, I just want to add that I think for me, it's just been so hard, David, to break through, right? A lot of that is sort of as a minority, as a woman in America, Indian American, whatever, that I feel like I'm just now seeing the door, and it's taken so long to come to the door, So I think when you look at, and I'm sure you've heard that 10-year overnight success,
Right.
that's kind of how I feel, that it's taken 7 years for me to see the door. But now I'm at this stage of like, I want to clean up on local businesses. I want to pick up as many local businesses on retainer as possible. And yeah, I think we're really positioning ourselves, David, for exponential revenue growth. And that's what we need right now. That's what we want right now. And, I think, whatever has happened for good reason. But I think now is the time to really, just grow and then also to sustain that growth, So, yeah.
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 Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you once again, and best of luck opening that door and shooting through.
That's right. That's right. Down right at the door. I can feel it. Thank you. Thank you. It means a lot. And I hope that, with each generation, it gets easier. If for me, it took 7 years to see the door, I would love for my future, daughter to take 2 years, because I don't think it's appropriate. It's been too hard. It's been too hard. And I think, I grew up in America. It shouldn't have been this hard, but it was. So, take that as you will.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks again.